On today's Locked On Giants podcast, Brandon Olsen of New York Giants on SI drops by with his unique perspectives on the New York Giants 2025 draft class. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, we're going to recap the draft, the New York Giants draft. Now, you have heard my opinions about it, but as I like to do on this show, I like to get other people to come in who follow the Giants in a professional capacity and get their takes on it, because sometimes their takes are different from mine. And on today's show, we've got Brandon Olsen. Now, some of you who follow Florida, you will recognize him as the host of Locked On Gators, and some of you who read New York Giants on SI, you will probably recognize Brandon's name because he is a contributor over there, and he is here now today to give his thoughts on the New York Giants draft class. Brandon, welcome in.
I'm so happy to be here finally covering what I think is a really good draft class. Been a while since I've been like, front to back. I love it, but here we are.
Yeah. I mean, on paper, it looks like a fantastic class. You know, no reaches for anybody, good value, checked off all the boxes that I think needed to be checked off. So, let's break it all down. We'll start with the day one guys, Abdul Carter. In your mind, Brandon, how much was Abdul Carter a no-brainer for the Giants at number 3, given, the fact that Cam Ward, they knew they weren't going to get him. Travis Hunter, we kind of knew he wasn't going to come to the Giants. Did they make the right decision with Abdul Carter, considering that they already have Chauncey Golston, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns?
I absolutely think so. I'm a firm believer in, especially early on in the draft. Like if you're picking that early in the draft, there's a reason why you're picking that early in the draft. And you just take the best player available at that point at a premium position. So it could have been Cam Ward. It could have been Travis Hunter. It could have been Abdul Carter. And honestly, I think those 3 you couldn't go wrong with, no matter who it was. I firmly believe that I thought Travis Hunter was the best player in the class, partially because of his playing both sides of the ball. I thought Abdul Carter was the second best player in the class. And so I think that adding him the 3rd overall pick, it doesn't matter who else you have there. You're going to rotate on the edge consistently. And I do think that also now having all 3 of those big names of Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and now Abdul Carter, as well as Chauncey Golston in there, I think that you have a lot of versatility with just who you can put out there in what situations. And you can kind of play matchup football, I guess. I also cover basketball, so you talk about playing matchup basketball, of trying to just create mismatches there. But I think you could do the same thing with this defensive front. I think you can find a weak spot in the offensive line and attack them. And I think that Abdul Carter gives you a guy that should immediately be a significant contributor and can develop into a true franchise cornerstone player.
When you look at the strengths of Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, how does Abdul Carter complement each of those guys?
I think Abdul Carter is a very well-rounded rusher. He's also incredibly inexperienced playing on the edge. Like this past year was his first true season playing full-time edge, and I do think he's got a lot of room to grow. But I think that if you have Brian Burns on one side and you have Abdul Carter on the other, like just pin their ears back and let them run, and they're just going to be in the backfield quickly. I think that Kayvon Thibodeau and Abdul Carter on the opposite sides, I think that is just a violent group up front. And I think Abdul Carter is, again, still trying to figure some things out on the edge. But even if he was playing 3 years as a full-time edge rusher, his film would be fantastic. And Giants fans, we get to look at Abdul Carter at Penn State and see that that's his first year playing that. Like, he still is learning the nuances of the position, but he's got all the athletic traits. And I think that is a massive advantage for the Giants to have just all three of those guys. And the way that they mesh with, I do think Abdul Carter, when it's all said and done, is going to be the most well-rounded of that bunch. I think that he poses that physical ability and the athletic traits to just do that. And I think that he's going to be the most well-rounded of the bunch. So I do think that maybe he plays more snaps than a Kayvon Thibodeau this year, but not because he's necessarily just, he's better, but because he's more versatile and can play all around.
What about his role as a potential inside linebacker, which is a position he played the first couple of years of his college career? I mean, how do you see them maybe working that into the equation, if at all?
I absolutely think that they'll line him up off ball, bring him down in between the A gap. Like, if you have one side Brian Burns, one side Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence on the inside, whoever else you want on the inside, it could be fellow rookie Darius Alexander. And then you have just Abdul Carter lined up as the Mike or anywhere else on the inside and just walking down to the line of scrimmage. I think every quarterback should feel a little bit of fear in their heart if that's the combination that lines up and then you see Abdul Carter joining. I don't think that he's as dominant as Micah Parsons has been, but I do think that he's got that kind of versatility to be able to line up wherever you want to use him and make a play. And I think he's got the athletic ability to, you can line him up off ball, have him come up to the line of scrimmage, or have him not come up to the line of scrimmage and just occasionally use him off ball. But I do think he's best suited rushing the passer.
All right, now let's talk about the Giants' other first-round draft pick. They traded back into the bottom of the first round for Jackson Dart, the quarterback, which towards, as we got closer to the draft, that was the name that was linked to the team. How much do you like the move? Do you think Jackson Dart is a good fit for what the Giants do on offense?
I love the move, honestly. I think that when you look at Jackson Dart, just physically, I think he could do anything that Brian Daboll asks of him. I think for me and looking at Jackson Dart, when you watch his college film at Ole Miss, it was, people throw around the term college offense. That was about as college offense as it gets without being a full triple option. And many people will say, he played in that, I don't want him. And I think that's silly. I do. I think that's just completely dismissing his talent. He still has all of the physical tools that you look for. I don't think he has the elite of the elite arms, but I think he has an arm to fill a playbook. He could do anything that any offense is going to ask him to do on schedule. I don't think it's quite Josh Allen caliber arm, but I think outside of Patrick Mahomes, no one has that caliber arm. So I think it's an injustice to expect that caliber. But I will also say that Ole Miss's offense, it's not the easiest thing in the world. And as often as people want to say, it's a college offense, Jackson Dart did what he was asked to do at Ole Miss. He found out how to master that offense, and he ran it better than anybody else has previously, maybe better than anyone else ever will under Lane Kiffin. And so while I think that, yes, that college offense maybe didn't let him truly grow mentally as much as he could have, I have a hard time faulting someone for saying, hey, you were asked to do this. You did this masterfully. You can't do anything else. I think that's silly. I think that, if anything, what Jackson Dart showed was that if you teach him how to run an offense, he's going to be able to keep that offense on schedule. And I think that even at Ole Miss, he showed when things break down, he can make an offense run off schedule as well. So I think he could do the off platform. He could do the backyard football style plays. But I also think that with time and reps, he can absolutely learn how to run this offense to its maximum efficiency.
What is his biggest thing that he needs to kind of focus on in the coming year before he's considered pro ready?
For me, I think it was just sometimes he pressed a little bit at Ole Miss, and by that I just mean he was down and things weren't going their way, and he kind of tried to tried to hero ball it a little bit. I mean, I look at the Florida game this past year, which I'm not just bringing up because it's Florida. I'm bringing it up because it's the time that he threw a pick to maybe lose the game. It got called back because of a penalty. And then he threw another pick. And the whole time it was simply he was trying to force things that weren't there at the time. And that was one of the games where Ole Miss's offensive line wasn't holding up nearly as well as they have for the entirety of the season. And things just crumbled. But I do think that with a little bit of an improved offensive line in front of him, because they were also dealing with some issues on that offensive line at the time. So I think with an improved offensive line there, an opened up playbook, because also Ole Miss's offense, they didn't give you a lot of wiggle room. I'll say it was very, hey, we're going to run this RPO. We're going to make this read, this throw, and if it's not there, then take off. And so I do think that he wasn't really helped with that offense. He was more so just the facilitator. He was the point guard. He was the point guard for a Basketball Reference. He's just there facilitating, helping others get set up. And I do think that that's one of those things where he just needs time to grow and develop into a more complete quarterback and mature to not press in certain times.
Hey, Giant fans, the NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets. All right, we're talking New York Giants draft with Brandon Olsen of New York Giants on SI. You can also see him on Locked On Gators. And Brandon, let's now turn our attention to the day 2 pick. The Giants only having one day 2 pick because they traded pick number 99, which is at the bottom of the bottom of the third round, to get Jackson Dart. But they came up with a guy that I know you absolutely love, and more so because he like you is a fellow Rocket.
Yeah, Darius Alexander, huge addition. Loved getting him, and he was someone that earlier in the pre-draft process, I think I mocked him to the Giants a few times, just because I do love the fit. Again, I think that while many people look at this Giants defensive line, and I think a lot of fans looked at it and went, okay, it's really good, leave it as it is. I do think that, football is won and lost in the trenches. It's fun to have really great corners and really great receivers, but football is still won and lost in the trenches. And I do think that adding a Darius Alexander to an Abdul Carter, to a Dexter Lawrence, to a Brian Burns, to a Kayvon Thibodeau, to a Chauncey Golston, that just makes your defensive line so complete and so scary. And I'm pretty sure I even wrote about this when the pick was made, that the quarterback can't see with tears in his eyes. And he's not going to be able to do that when you have all of these behemoths just breathing down his neck. And so I do think that adding Darius Alexander, who is a violent football player, I think that just adds so much. Especially, you can add Abdul Carter and say, well, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, someone has to come off the field at some point. With Darius Alexander now, you can say, all right, whoever is on the edge, plus Dexter Lawrence, plus Darius Alexander, he should be in one-on-one situations almost exclusively when you look at who else is going to be rushing on that line, and he should feast in those situations.
Where is his best position? I mean, I know he's played a little nose tackle. I know he's played 3-tech. I think he's played a little 5-tech. But where is he best fit in the Giants defense, do you think?
I think his best fit's the 3-tech or the 5. I think he can play the nose. I'm not saying he can't. I just think that his best fit's probably a 3. And the 5 would just be, I don't think that there's many modern offensive tackles that are going to have an easy time slowing him down when he just rushes you with that aggressive mindset, physical attacking mindset. I think it's really tough as an offensive tackle, especially as we are entering an NFL phase where even offensive linemen are getting lighter than they used to be. Now you can just have a giant like Darius Alexander, obviously not literal giant, but a just monstrous rusher. And I think that causes a lot of issues, especially when you have some of these, wide zone offensive tackles. And it's like, well, he's a little undersized. You can't be undersized against a guy like Darius Alexander. So I think 3 tech's the best spot, then 5, then nose.
In the past, when Dexter Lawrence would come off the field, teams would go right at that spot. Do you think, though, if they were to move Darius Alexander to that spot, would there be that much of a drop-off, do you think, at this point? And what does he need to do in order to maybe, again, be more pro-ready?
I think there would be a drop-off, not because Darius Alexander is bad, but because Dexter Lawrence is, in my opinion, the best nose tackle on the planet. And so there'd be that drop-off there. But as far as Darius Alexander being more pro-ready, I think part of it just comes down to being more consistent with his hands against the run. I do think that's something with Toledo that they asked him to do, is to just kind of wreck. That's it. They weren't necessarily asking him to move with specific purpose. It was kind of just, hey, just cause havoc, because this is an NFL player. This is a guy that a couple of months ago, people were talking about, and if he wasn't 25 years old as a rookie, we'd be having a conversation about him as a late day 1 pick, not a mid day 2 pick. And I think that talent meant that he was just better than everybody that he lined up against in the MAC. And that's no disrespect to the MAC. Darius Alexander's just a dude. And so I think that he's allowed to just wreck people in Toledo. I do think that his hand usage needs to become more consistent at the next level. But I also think that, as someone that has watched a lot of Toledo football over recent years, I think that Darius Alexander has gotten better every single year. I thought he would declare the season prior, just because I mean, you look at the traits for him and they're still there. He's just older now. That's it. So I think that looking at the traits, he would have been a mid to early day 3 pick had he come out earlier, but he didn't. He came back, made himself a lot more money, and he continued to dominate, but he also improved technically, because that's the thing you really need to do when you come back to school, is that if you're going to come back to school, you need to show progress and development. And I think that Darius Alexander did that. And that's one of the reasons that teams in general didn't care too much about him being a 25-year-old rookie, because he's going to come in and be an instant impact player from day 1.
We keep talking about age, or you keep mentioning age. Why is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, he had extra years to hone his craft. So, we've heard that not just, for Darius Alexander, but for some other guys. But why is that necessarily a bad thing?
I think part of it is that you look at someone who is, we'll say Darius Alexander 25, Tyler Shuck 26, where it's just they're a little bit older, and so you kind of think, well, they're probably closer to their ceiling than they're ever going to be. And so if their floor is good right now, then their floor is good, and it's not too much of a concern. I do think that for a lot of people, it's about, you're not going to have that long-term development because they are probably closer to their ceiling than someone who is 21 years old on the interior there. Like, if you had someone with the same physical tools of Darius Alexander, but he's 21, they'd be talking about him as a first-round pick, because they'd say, well, he's this good now and this young. Imagine what he can be with some more development. And also, when you talk about contract length, I think people bring that up. Honestly, I think people bring it up too much. I think if you can get 2 contracts out of a player, that's a great draft pick. I don't care where you pick them. If you get 2 full contracts from them, that's a great pick. That's going to be 7-8 years regardless. So if you're 21 or 25 at the time, you're going to be a great pro, and that's going to be a worthwhile pick. I think for me personally, more of it just comes from, I think that at that point you're closer to your ceiling, and so less of a boom or bust player. But again, if the floor is good and you're around for 2 contracts, I think it's a fantastic pick.
Hey, Giant fans, ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com to get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, and that promo code is LOCKONNFL for half off your first year. All right, let's move on now to day 3 because there were a bunch of picks, and I thought the day 3 picks were just, I was very happy with them. I don't know how you felt about them, but where do you think the Giants got the best value on day 3?
I think it's Marcus Bowe out of Purdue. I think that a lot of people looked at him as, a few months ago, it was maybe day 1, maybe day 2, or early day 2. So to get him on day 3 was just a steal. And I understand, there's other concerns about him, but I think he's just such a good football player, such a freaky athlete that you could just line him up. I think he could play either guard spot. I know he played right guard and right tackle, but I think he could play either guard spot without much of an issue at all. And I think that people are overblowing the arm length concern. I think people get hung up on that far too much about, well, he only has 32-inch arms, not 32.5-inch arms. I think that's silly because a lot of it comes down to, is someone going to get their hands on you first? And because if you completely get your hands there first, it doesn't matter who has longer arms. If I'm there first, I'm there first, and I can win the battle that way. And that's how Marcus Bowe wins. He's got elite hand quickness, elite foot quickness. So I don't think it matters too much about who has longer arms. He's going to get his hands on you, and he's probably going to dominate you at that point. And so I think that the pick's fantastic. The size, really not an issue for me.
Brian Dable said that Marcus Bowe is going to get some work at tackle. Is he an NFL tackle, or is he better suited, in your opinion, for guard?
I think he can play tackle, but I do think he's got elite guard potential. I think he could be, serviceable tackle, but yeah, I think if you put him on the interior and he could just wreck stuff, especially if you put him in pulling situations. He's just such an athlete there that I think that he's going to be phenomenal as a guard. And hey, if he could work out a tackle, he could work out a tackle. Again, I mentioned, we were talking about Darius Alexander. Tackles are getting smaller. They're getting lighter. Maybe Marcus Bowe can help introduce more of those undersized tackles into the league. But I do think that his ceiling's higher at guard, but also I think that's true with a lot of tackles just because guard's easier to play. So I do think that Marcus Bowe could work out at guard perfectly fine and tackle perfectly fine.
All right. Now, another draft pick that they picked up, I think you mocked him. I know I mocked him to the Giants. He is the new Thunder in the Thunder and Lightning backfield, Cam Scataboo. How much do you love that pick?
I love it. I like when people play with violence. And Cam Scataboo does. Like, you could tackle him, but you're probably going to feel it more than he is. And just, we had there's that Marshawn Lynch clip where there's like, I just love being able to run through someone's face over and over and over and over and over again. And that's how Cam Scataboo plays. He's gonna make you be like, is this really, like, am I getting paid enough for this? I know it's 7 figures, but am I getting paid enough for this? And if you can make someone feel like that, then it's a great pick. And I was told that there was a decent chance Cam Scataboo would be picked late day 2. And so to get him at all on day 3 is a great value there. And I do think that he's an immediate impact player.
Do you agree, though? Can you envision him in that Thunder role? You think back to, Brandon Jacobs, Ahmad Bradshaw, Thunder and Lightning. Before that, Ron Dane was the Thunder role for the Giants. I mean, is that what fits Scataboo? Is he more between the tackles, or is he more of an outside type guy, or both?
He's more of a between the tackles guy, but I do think that I think one thing with the Brandon Jacobs comparison is just he doesn't have the size that Brandon Jacobs is. Brandon Jacobs was a defensive end out there. Like he was just a giant back there. But I do think Cam Scataboo runs with physicality. I know that there's people who talk about the difference between being physical in college as a running back and being physical in the NFL as a running back. You're playing significantly bigger players. I know that there's people that talk about how he played in the Big 12. And so, it's not known as being a great defensive conference. Look at what he did in Texas. Look at how many first round picks Texas had this year. Or how many just draft picks they had this year. And look at how many they'll have over the coming seasons. and know that every single one of the defenders that gets drafted out of Texas for the next 3 years, or including this year and then the next 2 years, know that every single one of them had Cam Scataboo put them in the ground at some point. And just know that I don't care that he played for Arizona State. I don't care about any of that. He is physical. He is violent. He is great. And he's just, he's a dense bowling ball of punishment. And I just love the addition of Cam Scataboo.
A lot of people have referred to him as a human bowling ball. And I had Richie Bradshaw on the show earlier in the week. He called him the people's running back. He said that's the nickname he hopes sticks or catches on at any rate when Cam Scataboo gets here, which I thought was a pretty cool nickname. I mean, Cam Scataboo, when he spoke on the conference call after he was selected, oh my gosh. I'm like, I like this guy already, and I haven't even met him. Quite a guy, and he can do more. A good pass catcher out of the backfield. I believe he played special teams, and didn't he punt a few times too?
Yeah, when he was at Sacramento State, he used to do everything. He used to do everything. And then you look at him in the college football playoff. He threw a touchdown pass deep downfield. You look at him play against Texas, and he throws a bomb out of the backfield. And he threw a big touchdown pass against Texas. So he just comes out. He does everything. And any time that you've seen him speak, like he looks like he just thoroughly enjoys it. And one of my favorite things about him is that he was told, hey, if you want to be an NFL running back, you need to completely change your body. Because he was basically told, hey, you're a little pudgy for a running back. And if you want to be an NFL running back, you need to completely change your body. And so he did it. And I think that's something that's often overlooked about players that are willing to take that feedback, take that advice, and actually act upon it. And I think Cam Scataboo did that and made himself. He was talked about previously as completely undrafted, not going to be an NFL guy at all, and turned himself into a 7-figure running back.
For sure. I can't wait till he gets up here. Now, let's talk about the 2 7th-round picks, Thomas Fidone, the second, and Corey Black. So we've got a tight end and we've got a cornerback. Now, I'm not going to lie. I was a little bit surprised they went tight end with the first of the 7th-round picks. I figured they might pick up one undrafted free agent, because, it was a deep class. I wasn't too surprised that they picked up another cornerback because you can never have too many corners. But what do you like about these 2 7th-rounders?
With Thomas Fidone, I like his upside. I think because I do think he's going to be someone that needs a bit of time. And I think that was maybe part of the addition was that, he's going to have that time to grow in that tight end room right now. And then long term, it's Daniel Bellinger, Chris Manhertz, and Greg Dulcich are all on the last year of their contract. And so maybe 2026 is the year we really see Thomas Fidone the second play. With Kobe Black, I will admit this to you. Jim Knowles, one of my favorite defensive coordinators on the planet. He's currently at Penn State. Previously was at Ohio State. Previously was at Oklahoma State. And to be able to play corner in that defense is not easy. And Corey Black did exactly that. He did that at a high level. Played a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 4, a lot of running vertical. And I don't think that Corey Black's great in man coverage. I do know that he's great in zone coverage. I know that he's great at special teams. And I also know that there's going to be people. I got texts from people that were like, oh, he's 6 feet tall. We have enough short corners that aren't going to be able to play outside in the NFL. He's also got a damn near 6'6" wingspan. Like, he's going to be fine out there to go out and play. It's not about how tall you are. It's about how tall you play. And Corey Black plays tall enough to be able to line up outside if they want him to do that. I do think he could bounce inside and work out there as well. But he plays with enough size and he's got the talent to actually contribute at some point. I don't know if that's going to be this year, but I think that he can do it. And I think he's a pretty decent scheme fit to get on day 3.
Of these day 3 picks, which one do you think has the most upside?
The most upside, I think Marcus Bowe. I think that he's just got all the athletic tools. It's just, I know that there's a medical concern there somewhere. And I know that he's got the length concerns, which again, to me, not that much of a concern with his athletic tools. So I think that it's Marcus Bowe, especially when you look at the value of the pick, 154th overall. If you can get a guy that actually becomes a starter and a plus starter, which I absolutely think Marcus Bowe can do, then I don't think it matters about anything else, any of the questions that led to this. And so for me, it's Marcus Bowe.
All right, now final question for you. What's your grade on this Giants draft class?
For those that don't know me, I am critical. Okay, I'm not biased about this. I think I'm going to give them an A minus. I think it was a great draft. I don't like to do the A plus stuff. I barely like to give it an A at all, let alone A minus. But I'm going to give it an A minus. I love the draft. I thought it was great. I thought it was one of the best in the entire league. And I think that this is a team that, based on this draft, feels like they're moving more serious than they did previously.
Yeah, because they didn't have any like glaring holes. I mean, you can make the case that quarterback was a glaring hole, but they have a temporary solution in place. There wasn't any position where they kind of had to force a pick at a specific, spot. At least that's how I saw it.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of went best player available. And I think even with Jackson Dart, it was, well, we think he's better than this pick and he's still here. So let's go move up and lock him in and get our guy where 2025, Russ is QB1, 2026. I think it's fair to say, hey, let Jackson Dart and James Winston duke it out and figure out who's going to be your starting quarterback. Or, if Russ comes back again, then Russ comes back again and we can have another conversation. But I think this feels like the Giants have more of a plan this year than they've had in any other time during the Joe Shane, Brian Dable tenure.
Yeah, I agree. And let's see if this plays out. I mean, the heat is on. They have to, be better than they were last year. They have to show progress that they didn't show last year. But you know what? They had a strong free agency crop. The draft class looks good. Joe Shea needed to check off that box. Now it's just a matter of putting it all together and seeing how these guys are going to fit into the big picture. All right, Brandon, thank you so much for joining me. He is Brandon Olsen. You can find his written work over on New York Giants on SI. You can find his podcast. He is Locked On Gators, so he knows a lot about college football and very good at what he does. So do check him out there, as well as all of our college hosts who do a fantastic job. And Giant fans, be sure you keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast. I've got some surprises coming up for you for the rest of the week, so you don't want to miss them. For Brandon Olsen, I'm Patricia Traina. Thanks so much for joining us, spending part of your day with us, and we will see you again tomorrow, Giant fans.